I wasn't looking for a new job when the email arrived. The sender address was a string of numbers, no company name, no signature, no attachments. It simply read, "You have been selected for a confidential field position. Details will follow. Compensation, substantial." I would have ignored it if not for the strange familiarity of the wording, as though I'd read it before. The next morning I received a call from a woman who didn't give a name. Her voice was perfectly neutral, but something about it made my scalp prickle. "Your assignment begins Monday. Pack lightly. Transportation will arrive at 3 a.m. sharp." Then she hung up. There was no opportunity to ask questions, and maybe that's why I hadn't had work in over 4 months. I was burning through my savings, and the idea of being wanted again, of having a role, felt comforting. Maybe that's how they get people like me. The vehicle was unmarked, a black SUV with no plates and tinted windows. The driver didn't speak. I tried asking where we were going, but he only turned up the radio to mask my voice. It wasn't music, but static and faint whispers, as if a station just out of reach. I should have insisted on more details. I should have opened the door and walked away. But by the time I realized how far we'd gone, the city lights had vanished. There was only open land, flat and empty, under a sky choked with low, unmoving clouds. We drove for what felt like 8 or 9 hours. No cell service. My phone died halfway through and wouldn't turn back on. When we arrived, the driver pointed to a squat brick building next to a weathered sign that had no writing on it, just peeling white paint. "This is the town hall," he said. He didn't come inside. He drove off the moment I stepped out, gravel crunching under the tires, leaving only a sharp smell of engine oil in the morning air. The town, or what passed for it, was barely more than a cluster of low buildings. The architecture was mid-century but oddly well maintained, as if preserved in a jar. No power lines, no street signs, not even a main road, just dirt paths that coiled between structures like veins. There were no people on the streets, and no sound except for a distant mechanical hum that never stopped. I stood there for a long time, feeling like I had walked into an old photograph. Inside the building I was greeted by a man who introduced himself only as the director. His face was pale and strangely symmetrical. He wore a dark suit that didn't fit quite right, as if tailored for someone else. He didn't offer a handshake. "You've arrived on time." "That's good. You'll find punctuality is important here." He handed me a binder. "Your duties are listed inside. Read it thoroughly. There are 2 rules you must obey without exception. 1. Never leave your assigned residence after dark. 2. Never ask about the missing day. Do you understand?" I nodded. He stared at me for an uncomfortably long time before saying, "Good. You begin tomorrow." My assigned house was at the end of a cul-de-sac called East Loop, though no map marked it. All the homes looked identical. White walls, green trim, shutters that didn't open. Mine was furnished, sterile, and silent. There was a refrigerator stocked with identical meals, plastic containers labeled by day, Monday through Sunday, but one was always missing. I counted twice: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Sunday was gone. And yet the week always started fresh with a full fridge except for that same absence slot. I noted it in a journal I brought, just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. The work itself was bizarre. I was given files, dozens of them, of people I'd never heard of. Each one contained transcripts, dates, strange reports about perception anomalies and cohesion drift. I had no idea what they meant. I was told to cross-reference the data with archived footage in the basement of a building labeled records. The recordings were grainy, like old VHS tapes. Some were security feeds from homes and businesses that didn't seem to exist. In one video, a man stared at a clock for 6 hours without blinking. In another, a group of children stood motionless in a circle, while a woman whispered instructions off-screen. I began dreaming about the faces in those tapes. By the end of the first week I started noticing things. The townspeople, if you could call them that, never made eye contact. They all walked the same way, like they were following invisible lines. Their conversations, when they happened, were mechanical, recycled, as if pulled from a script. One night I saw the same man walk past my window 3 times in 1 hour, always wearing the same clothes, always glancing up at exactly the same moment. I wrote it down. Later, when I tried to verify it with my wall calendar, I found something strange. The date had jumped from Thursday to Saturday. I had no memory of Friday at all. I confronted the director the next morning. "I think there's an error in the calendar system," I said carefully. "Yesterday just disappeared." His expression didn't change. "You're mistaken. Thursday was followed by Saturday. As always, that is the order here." He walked past me and shut the door. I stood there in the hallway, cold with the realization that this was not a mistake. It was part of the design. The next night I set an alarm for what would have been Friday. 12:01 a.m. The clock blinked, then froze. My lights flickered off. I lit a candle, waited, and I swear just outside my house there was a shape standing on the lawn, unmoving, faceless, watching me. When I looked again, it was gone. But in its place was a folder. I opened it. Inside was a single photo. Me, standing in the records basement, staring at a camera I don't remember seeing. My own eyes were bloodshot, my mouth open, The timestamp. Friday. I think I was awake during the missing day. I didn't sleep after finding the photo I couldn't remember taking. I stayed in the living room with the lights on, watching the front door in case something returned, to leave another envelope or just to watch again from the lawn. By sunrise, I felt hollow, like a part of my brain had been scooped out, and I was waiting to find out which part was missing. I examined the photograph again. There was something wrong with the timestamp. It didn't just say Friday. It said Friday, 13/2/74, a time that shouldn't exist. I zoomed in on the clock on the wall behind me in the image, and it showed the same impossible time. I brought the photo to the records building that morning, hoping to find the original tape that captured that moment. The receptionist didn't look up when I walked in. She just pointed to the basement like she already knew what I was going to do. There was no label on the tape I eventually found, just a sticky note that read recovered footage. Eyes only. When I played it, the screen stayed black for 23 seconds, then static. Then my face filled the screen, distorted, lit by flickering emergency lights. I was pacing, muttering, clearly disturbed. The camera angle never changed, suggesting it was fixed, but the angle was impossible. It floated above me, turning slightly as I moved. Then I stopped pacing and looked directly into the lens and said, very clearly, this isn't the first time. The recording cut to black. No sound, no warning. I rewound it. The footage wasn't there anymore. That night I set up my phone camera and placed it on the living room table, pointing directly at the couch where I intended to sleep. I charged it fully and enabled airplane mode. I wrote a note to myself, "Dante, believe what they tell you in the morning." Then I went to bed. When I woke up, I checked the phone. The file had been corrupted. The screen wouldn't turn on. I tried plugging it in, and the battery icon flickered once, then died. But what scared me more than the broken phone was the change in the room. My coffee table was in a different position. The candle I had placed on the windowsill was now on the floor. And on the back of my note, in my handwriting but slanted and aggressive, were the words, "You broke the rule." I had no memory of writing it. At work, things had changed too. The folders I was assigned now included my own name, my own notes, my own handwriting, and documents I never typed. One was titled Subject 47, Partial Retention. Inside were pages describing my dreams in exact detail, including things I never wrote down. There was a line that read, "Subject displays signs of integration resistance. Protocol escalation pending." I asked the director about it, and he didn't pretend to be surprised. He just said, "Some people begin to notice sooner than others. The town requires symmetry. That includes understanding." When I asked what that meant, he smiled for the first time, and it was not reassuring. "You'll see soon. It's almost Friday." I tried to leave that afternoon. I packed a bag, walked to the edge of town where the road should have continued. It didn't. It ended in a flat plain of cracked earth and fog. I walked for what felt like hours, but the town never got smaller behind me and the road never reappeared. Eventually I turned back. My house was exactly as I left it, except one thing had changed: the calendar. Now all the days were crossed out except Friday. Someone had drawn a spiral into the square for that day. Dark ink pressed so hard it had bled through to the wall beneath. That night I locked every door and window. I covered the mirrors. I sat in the kitchen with a flashlight and a notebook and wrote down everything I could remember from the last few days. As I wrote, I realized time wasn't behaving normally. My watch said 10:14. My phone said 3:33. The microwave clock was off completely. I checked the wall calendar again. It was blank. Just white squares. Then the hum started. Low at first, like an electrical drone, but rising steadily until the entire house vibrated. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside me. When I looked out the window, I saw them figures in the street, standing perfectly still, each one facing a different direction. None of them moving, but all vibrating slightly like a bad TV signal. I blinked and they were closer. I blinked again and they were gone. At exactly 13:74, the hum stopped. The lights went out. The air felt heavier. I passed out or blacked out or fell asleep, I don't know which. When I woke up, I was lying in the middle of the town square, and my clothes were soaked in a viscous red fluid that didn't smell like blood. My notebook was gone. My bag was gone. My phone was shattered beside me, and in my pocket was a single objector key with a tag attached. The tag read Room 0. There is no Room 0 in any of the buildings I've been assigned to. I checked. I asked one of the other workers, a man named Price, who has never spoken to me before, and his face went white when he saw the tag. "Burn it," he whispered. "Burn it before you remember." Then he walked away. That evening, a new envelope was on my kitchen table. It was sealed in wax. Inside was a report, marked Level Omega Clearance. I shouldn't have been able to read it, but there it was in front of me. It detailed a failed experiment called chronological suppression, Field A, and listed 52 prior test subjects. All had been eliminated except for one, Subject 47. Me? The last page was blank except for a sentence scrawled in red. "You were never supposed to wake up on Friday." I think I know what the missing day is now. It's not a day that it was erased. It's a day that it repeats. Over and over and over. A loop, a test, and every time I wake up in it, I remember just a little more. And they know that I'm starting to put it together. I kept the key hidden under my mattress, though I could feel it pulse slightly whenever I got too close, like a heartbeat encased in brass. I tried not to look at it too often. but the tag that read Room 0 seemed darker every time. As if the ink itself was decaying, no one mentioned the key again, not even Price, who avoided eye contact like I was contagious. The director never summoned me that week either. My assignments ceased, the folders stopped coming, but my dreams got worse in them. I was always underground, always walking in circles through a hallway with no doors. The walls were lined with mirrors, but they didn't show my reflection. Instead, they showed glimpses of places that looked familiar but weren't. Like watching your own life through someone else's eyes. And one, I saw myself kneeling before a door, with the tag Room 0 hanging from the handle and blood pooled at my knees. I would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, and always the same sound would follow, a soft rhythmic tapping like someone gently knocking from inside my closet. I finally decided to find Room 0, not because I was brave, but because the fear of not knowing was eating me alive. I started by checking every building in town again, starting with the town hall and ending at the records building, but there were no locked doors, no numbered rooms without labels, until I noticed something strange in the blueprint archive. A folder marked Basement Expansion, 5/17, listed one more room than the current layout showed. There was a small square drawn in red beneath the foundation, with no connecting hallway, no stairs, just an empty space marked Observation Chamber. R0 and a note beside it that read, "Do not map." I traced my fingers over the copy like touching it would somehow make it real, and then I looked at the back of the page. There in faint pencil were 4 numbers scrolled hurriedly: 1374. The impossible time. The next Friday I waited until the hum began. It always started at 13:74, which by all logic couldn't exist, but in this town logic bent when no one was watching. I waited for the lights to flicker and the clocks to freeze, and then I went to the records building. The key in my pocket felt warm, this time not hot, not painful, but as if it had a will of its own. The basement was darker than usual, emergency lights flickering slower than before, almost as if time itself was dragging. I walked past the rows of tapes, past the broken monitors, to the far wall where a mop closet used to be. But now the wall was different, smoother, newer, and in the center of it was a single outline like a hatch, barely noticeable. The key trembled in my hand. I inserted it into the concrete and felt resistance, and then it clicked. The wall groaned like metal bending under pressure, and a door-shaped seam slid inward, a dark, narrow staircase spiraling down into a space that should not have fit beneath the building. I descended for what felt like hours. The air was thick and wet and tasted faintly metallic. The walls were covered in writing, long streaks of black ink that glistened like oil, names, dates, formulas I couldn't decipher, but all surrounding the same symbol over and over, a spiral within a circle within a triangle at the bottom. I reached a chamber not much larger than my living room, circular, with mirrors on every wall, and in the center, a single metal chair bolted to the floor. In front of it, a table with an open folder. The pages inside were blank except the final one, which read Observation Log 47, Cycle 228, Status Aware. Subject retains trace memory through suppression. Subject may destabilize loop containment. Recommend extraction or nullification pending administrative review. And then I understood it wasn't just that Friday repeated. I was being studied inside it. Room 0 was not a room for people. It was a room for watching people, people like me. I turned slowly to face the mirrors, and this time they reflected me, not in the present, but all the versions of me across the loops. Every one slightly different. One had a broken arm. Another was bald. One stared directly into my eyes and mouthed the word "run." Then behind that reflection a shape moved, tall, thin, its face a mask of perfect skin stretched too tight. Its fingers were too long and they reached toward the back of my neck. Even though I stood alone in the room, I didn't turn around. I bolted up the stairs 2 at a time, the humming above growing louder the higher. I climbed until I wasn't sure if it was in the walls or my skull. I reached the top. The basement door had been sealed shut. I pounded on it, screamed, no response. I turned back and the stairs were gone, vanished behind smooth concrete. I was trapped but not alone. The lights in the chamber below turned red and a speaker crackled to life somewhere above me. A voice like the director's but distorted spoke. "Welcome back, Subject 47. Progress noted. Loop will resume. Do not resist. This is for your benefit." And then a high-pitched tone pierced the air, and everything dissolved into static. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my bed. It was Saturday, the sunlight too bright, the air too clean, and my calendar once again showed 6 days. Sunday was missing. No one mentioned Friday. Again, the records building was locked. The director told me to take the week off. But I noticed something different this time. People stared, not long, but just enough to know they saw something I couldn't hide. I checked under my mattress. The key was gone. In its place was the photo from the first Friday, now burned around the edges and on the back. A new message in red ink. "This is your last cycle. I think they know. I remember everything. I don't think I'm going to survive the next Friday." I didn't go to work the next day. I didn't eat. I barely moved. I sat at my window watching the town breathe around me like a creature that never slept. Every detail now seemed artificial. The way the clouds never moved, the way the shadows always, and recorded everything. If I exposed it and told the world, and for the first time he looked almost amused. On a Saturday, bleeding and broken but alive, because that's what the loop does. It keeps you inside. It protects the test. I waited until Friday. I stayed awake. I destroyed every clock in the house, but still, I knew when 13 to 74 came. The air changed. The hum began. My nose started to bleed. and the floor under me shifted like something beneath. The house was waking up. I took a knife and carved the word of my room, an empty metal frame stained with rust and blood, and on my desk was a folder again, this time marked Observation Log 48, subject New Loop Initiated. I checked my calendar, and every day was blank, no names, no numbers, just white space. I walked outside, and the town was gone, replaced by a single hallway stretching endlessly in both directions, white with no shadows, mirrors along both walls. Remember into my forearm just to anchor myself in pain and certainty. I walked to the records building, but the basement was sealed, solid concrete, no door, no seam. Just the word null burned into the surface. I walked the streets and found the townspeople standing outside, every house facing me perfectly still, eyes wide, mouths closed, vibrating ever so slightly, like they were buffering. The world has already forgotten this place, he said. Even we have forgotten what it was before it became this, a cage for the chronologically broken and over. And I felt my mind tearing, trying to stabilize the images. I ran toward the town hall, but it was gone. In its place was the staircase from room 0 descending into open air, twisting downward forever. I stepped onto it because I had nowhere else to go, and the town vanished around me. Sound stopped, light stopped. I was falling without motion for what felt like years, and then I landed in the chamber again. But it had changed. The mirrors now showed every loop at once, versions of me, screaming, dying, dissolving, hiding, versions of me tearing out their own eyes or kneeling in acceptance. One version held a key made of bone and mouthed a word I couldn't hear. He stepped aside and the wall behind him slid open, revealing a hallway I had never seen before, pure white without shadows stretching into nothing. Room 0 is only the first door, he said. What lies beyond it is older than us, older than the loop, older than time, behaving properly, a second chair facing the first end, and it sat me, not a reflection, not a memory, a living, breathing version of me with a remember scar still bleeding. He looked at me and said, I made it out, and I had to trap myself here to keep the others from breaking through. You have to take my place now. And before I could answer, the room shook and began collapsing. The walls folded in on themselves, like paper burned from the edges, and something crawled through the mirrors, not human, not describable, only hunger and shape and voice all at once. I screamed and lunged forward, and everything stopped. He told me I had a choice: step forward and finish the cycle, or run and be unmade completely. I asked him if anyone had ever escaped, and he smiled. The kind of smile that makes you want to stop existing fell at the same angled away. The air smelled like damp paper and something faintly sweet like decay trying to disguise itself as nostalgia. I tried writing down everything I remembered from the past 3 Fridays, but my hands wouldn't. Tea stopped shaking and the words kept shifting on the page. I finally tore it all up and threw the scraps into the sink. The faucet ran red when I turned it on. I didn't even flinch. I knew I had crossed a threshold, and whatever waited on the other side wasn't pretending anymore. The director summoned me at exactly noon, which was strange because he had none spoken to me since the day I found room 0. I walked to the town hall slowly, noting that the streets were now empty, just quiet but utterly still, like a film paused mid-frame. I entered his office. He was already standing, as if expecting something to begin. His suit was darker than before, his face sharper, more symmetrical, and less human. He didn't ask me to sit. Instead, he said, "You've seen too much. You understand too little. This place is a scar on the skin of time, and you are picking at the scab." I asked him what the town really was, and he didn't answer directly. He just stared at me with those perfect glass eyes and said, "The loop was never meant to hold this long. Memory seeps through like light through cracked paint. That's what you are now, a crack." I asked him what would happen if I refused to forget again, if I stayed awake on Friday. I went home. I considered running, but where would I go? The roads led nowhere. I considered dying, but something told me even that wouldn't end it. I would wake up again in the bed. And then the sky turned black, not night but void. All light vanished. The buildings flickered between versions. Like frames in a broken animation, wooden houses became towers, then ruins, then back again. Over in the center of the room was now. I woke up on Saturday in bed, sun pouring through the window, everything still and bright, but I was not alone. The other me was gone, but his chair remained in the corner. I think I'm not in the town anymore. I think I've become the new loop, and I think someone else is about to arrive.